You can switch our house over, but please, just don't mess up. I said, nothing's going to happen. And I was right for about 3 weeks. And one day, the phone rang, and I picked it up. It was Carolyn. And she said, Jerry, is there any reason why our lights are off? And I said, are you sure? She said, oh yeah, the lights are all off. And I said, let me call you right back. And so I hung up the phone. And as I'm standing, I looked around and said, does anybody have any idea why our lights are off? Did somebody send a disconnect order? And it's just, nobody had, they all had this blank stare. Now when you start a company, you know what you know. You know what you don't know. But you don't know what you don't know. And that's the scary bucket. That's the school of hard knocks. That means you've got to get out there and do it before you really find out what's going on. And this was suddenly landing in that category of we didn't know why our lights were on. Phone rings. It's one of our guys driving back to the office. He said, hey, I just turned on the radio. That because of this early heat wave here in Texas, there's not enough power on the grid. And TXU is he's rolling the brownouts all across Dallas. I went, God, that's great news. Hang up, phone rings again. Carolyn's there, and she said, hey, Jerry, the lights just came back on. Thank you very much. I said, no problem. It was our first customer service issue, and we nailed it. Well, we knew at that point in time we were ready to get started. We knew it was time to go out there and start attracting customers to the business. And we wanted to find customers at a low acquisition cost who would pay their bills and stay loyal. And one of the guys said, you just described what Excel Communications had when they went public. When they went public, they had the lowest cost of customer acquisition, the lowest attrition rate, and the lowest bad debt rate in the entire long-distance industry. And the reason was because they used direct sales as an acquisition method for their customers. And they were bringing in family and friends, and those people had all those attributes. And they said, if you're interested in that model, you need to meet Chris Chambers. Chris was there early. He was the 52nd employee at Excel Communications. And he was there in the room as they were concocting the magic compensation plan that enabled Excel to grow from $30 million to $1.5 billion in just 4 years. It was an unbelievable trajectory. And he saw not only what worked, but just as importantly, he saw what didn't work. So Chris and I got together the next day at Potbelly's in Addison, Texas, just north of Dallas. And over turkey sandwiches, we began to talk about the opportunity of electricity, selling electricity through direct sales. And he saw it immediately. He knew this is the perfect product. No product training required. You get out there, it's a service, it's recurring. He just knew immediately this is a great opportunity. And he gave me about a half a dozen things to think about and said, once you're convinced this is what you want to do, give me a call back. Thought about it over the weekend. He came in, I called him up on Monday and said, let's do it. And he came in the next day. So we sat down at that point in time inside of a conference room with a whiteboard and decided to map out what kind of company did we want to build. Now, I had never been in direct sales before. Didn't know anything about it. There's some great companies in Dallas, like Home Interiors and Mary Kay and a couple of others, that have great reputations, but I also heard about many others that probably tainted the entire industry. And I wanted to make certain that we were on the same page and quickly found out that we were. And that whatever we did, we wanted to be something that we could be proud of, that would protect our reputations, our family's reputations, and your reputations. We were talking about them before this thing even started. What we knew was that anytime any of you approached someone about being an Ambit customer or an Ambit consultant, you would be putting your reputations on the line. And you would be trusting that Ambit would deliver as promised. Not some of the time, but all the time. And we wanted to be worthy of that trust. We wanted to make you proud of the company that you were associated with. So at that moment, we said, if we're going to do this, we're going to build the finest and most respected retail energy provider in America. And that set the trajectory for this company from the very, very beginning. To be the finest, we knew we had to have great systems. From our telecom days, we knew that operationally, this company would be a data processing company. Everything that we did in the back office and all the systems that we had would be for data. We would receive data, retrieve data, store data, archive data, process data, present it on screens, be able to share it amongst all of our participants, but everything surrounded data. And in our telecom days, we saw that those companies with great back offices and systems thrived and prospered. All those without them, they basically imploded when the volume came and disappeared. So right away we turned to John Burke and we said, John, we're going to need these systems and it's got to be great. We have to be able to rely upon them and trust that they can grow with us. And John went and looked all over. He looked all around the country to see what systems might be out there. And he finally came back to us one day and said, what we need doesn't exist. And the cost of modifying it is too great and it would take too long. We're going to have to build our own. Chris and I just kind of smiled at him, shrugged, and said, okay, get started. He didn't like that answer. We weren't being very empathetic to him and all that he was going to have to start doing. But the next day he came back in with his head down and nobly started to architect and code the systems and lay them out and what he needed. And we looked at it and said, John, that's not going to work either. You're going to have to build an IT department second to none. And it's got to start right now. And so John did. He started bringing in people one by one. Today we have over 125 people in our IT group. There's nothing like it anywhere else in the entire industry in America today. It's qualitative. Qualitatively, it's what sets us apart from everybody else out there. And John, I can't tell you how proud we are of what he has assembled, what he has done, what he has architected. And early on, you know, there were a lot of people who laughed at us. It was unconventional to get out there and build your own system. And we heard it. We heard those people, you know, laughing back, saying, you guys don't have any clue what you're doing. We thought we did know what we were doing. But what we decided to do was to be unconventional. We didn't want to be like everybody else, and we didn't want to have the same results as everybody else. And we're glad we took the path that we did. It really established who we are as a company. To be the most respected, we knew we had to set standards for everybody, and that's when we decided never sacrificing integrity for growth. And we've emphasized that first for, you know, the people internally, because we knew we couldn't be there all the time for people when decisions had to be made. And so we just wanted to give them a compass to use to make those decisions on their own in our absence. But we also realized that it was very applicable to our consultant channel, and to let them know that this is what we stood for and what we wanted to do, and how we wanted to build this company when we grew. By the end of the summer of 2006, in August, John's first generation systems were ready to go, and we launched the business, and they worked. We expanded across Texas, we moved up to New York, and we just kept growing the company from there. Between 2006 and 2009, we grew so fast that, as you know, we were named the fastest growing private company in America. As an aside, when the letter came from Inc. magazine, it just came in a simple envelope, and it was a form letter. And I opened this thing up, and it said, congratulations, Jere Thompson. Your company, Ambit Energy, has ranked #1 in the entire company. And I look at this thing and go, can this be for real? We were just named the #1 fastest growing company, and they're sending me a form letter. So I walked it over to Chris, and I said, Chris, read this and tell me what you think. And he reads, smiles, and just gives me a high five. But it was just bizarre. And John came over a few minutes later, and we gave the letter to him, and he just, is this what I think it is? And I said, yeah. So we folded it up, put it back on the desk. We all went back to work for about 5 minutes. And we just realized we can't work today. So we went off and celebrated that afternoon. We did it again when we got to 1 million customers. So we've only done it twice. So maybe when we break $1 billion, we'll do it a third time. Same thing. But anyway, we were named the fastest growing company. But in 2010, we grew by 70%. In 2011, we grew another 60%. In 2012, we grew almost 50%, yet again, in spite of the law of big numbers. And now we've passed that 1 million customer mark. It's an unbelievable growth for the company and what's happened. And we're convinced it's happened because of the great people that we've been able to attract into this business. People like yourselves. And we're convinced that good people attract good people. And bad people, surrounded by good people, get squeezed out of the company. And that's a good thing. But we're excited about the opportunity in business because of the great people we've been able to attract into it. About 3 years ago, my wife, Carolyn, was sitting next to my dad at the Ambition event. And during the EC parade, when all the ECs were walking across the stage and introducing themselves, she leaned over to my father and said, Jerry, you ought to think about becoming an Ambit consultant. And he sensed a little bit of a challenge from her, and he said, okay, I will. So Dad, at age 77, signs up to become a consultant. 2 months later, he's the #1 customer gatherer in all of Hampton. You were crazy. He was determined to get his $429 back as fast as he could. But you know, to him, getting customers was just like going out and finding Easter eggs for a little kid and putting them in a basket. He just got great joy in doing it. One particular Friday, we have lunches together when he's in Dallas, and on Fridays, one day, an old friend of his named Bob Chilton came up, and Dad looked up at Bob and said, "Hey, Bob, who's your electricity provider?" And Bob said, "Well, it's TXU." And he said, "Well, do you want to save some money?" And he said, "Sure." So he reached in his pocket, pulled out a piece of paper, gave it to Bob, and said, "Here, fill this out." And Bob said, "Thank you." He walks away, and a few minutes later comes back and says, "Jerry, I really appreciate it. This form has been filled out." And Dad said, "No problem, I'll switch it this afternoon." And Bob said, "Thank you very much." And he walks away from the table. Dad, I said, "Dad, you make this look so easy." He said, "Well, I'm just saving the money." I said, "But you never mentioned the name of the company. You didn't mention the rate. All you did was tell them you're going to save them some money." He said, "Well, that's the way I do it." I said, "Well, it works." 2 days later, we came out of church, and Carolyn and the kids came on down the steps, and you know, I looked up, and Mom and Dad were coming out, and Dad was talking to the priest, and then all of a sudden, he sticks his head in between Carolyn and me, and he says, "I just asked the good Father whose electricity provider is." I said, "Dad, this is church." And he said, "Well, he's going to sign up." And I said, "Here we go." You know, what makes Chris and me so excited and makes us so proud is the fact that Dad, and he didn't sign up for the first 3 years, but when he finally got engaged, he really went crazy with it. But he trusts us. He trusts us with his friends, and friends that he's had for 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, even 70 years. He knows we're going to take care of him, and if something goes wrong, we're going to do the right thing and take care of that too. And our hope is that each and every one of you all know that we're going to take care of you and your family and your friends just the same way. Now, anytime you've grown as fast as Ambit has, mistakes are made. And we've made plenty of mistakes along the way. But we're determined to fix it. We will never let good enough be good enough. And we'll get on those mistakes, and over time, you know, we'll make certain they're all worked out properly. Anybody who's watched us over the last few years has seen us do that time and time again. You know, we're confident that it's going to happen. And we're confident because of the people we brought into the business. It's the culture that we have and that we've assembled in Dallas to make certain that this all works out right. President Ronald Reagan had this plaque on the credenza behind his desk in the Oval Office. And the plaque said, "There's no limit to what you can do or where you can go or how far you can go, as long as you don't mind who gets the credit." What President Reagan was emphasizing is that success is all about teamwork. It's about assembling the best people, guiding them with a vision, and giving the recognition, giving credit where credit is due. He understood that. He could have been talking about Ambit. It's the exact same principles. And for us to attract and retain the best people, you have to keep your standards high. Be the finest and most respected. Never sacrifice integrity for growth. Don't exaggerate. Please don't exaggerate. Exaggeration is like quicksand. Once you're trapped in it, it's so hard to get yourself out of it. It's impossible to build a long-term sustainable business on a foundation built on top of quicksand. So do it the right way. Build it on rock. Make sure that you're telling your story accurately and precisely. You're going to get knocked down. Just get back up. Sometimes you're going to have to start over. You might even have to start over again and again. It's okay. That's a good way to go. Our promise to you is we'll help you on every step of your journey. We'll be here to support you so that you can reach your goals, both financial and your dreams, and that you can do what you were created to do, what's really your passion in life. You know, every year, 2009, 10, 11, 12, and now 13, I've said this is going to be our best year ever. And I've never been wrong. This is going to be our best year ever. Is that it's your best year ever, too. But to get there, you've got to roll up your sleeves. Take advantage of this window of opportunity while it's here. It's going to be a fantastic year. And thank you for being so hospitable to us up here in beautiful Rochester, New York. We love you.